Welcome to the Airlift Tanker Association's virtual seminar series, Round 1. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speaker and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, or the United States government. Please take advantage of the question and answer feature in Teams to submit your questions anytime during the presentation. There is no need to wait until the end of the presentation portion to submit your questions. The earlier we get your question, the more likely we are to get to it in the time allotted. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the chairman of the Airlift Tanker Association, General Retired Duncan J. McNabb, to kick things off.
Mobility teammates, welcome to round 1 of the Airlift Tanker Association's virtual seminar series. For those who do not know me, I am General Duncan McNabb, former commander of AMC and TRANSCOM, and currently the chairman of ATA. First, let me say, as the COVID pandemic continues, we are in some unprecedented times, and we thank you for all you are doing for our nation, day in and day out, which saves lives and gives everyone hope. Please also thank your loved ones, the stay-at-home patriots, for their support of you serving the way you do. We literally can never thank them enough. Your Airlift Tanker Association is continuing to do all we can to support our mobility airmen, preserve our mobility culture, and strengthen our bonds. The purpose of this new virtual seminar series is to provide all of you with unique opportunities to hear from and interact with mobility leaders, leaders in industry, community leaders, and other guests of interest on topics that are important to you. Future seminar events are planned for roughly every couple of weeks, and we are targeting a total time of 45 minutes, with the presenters spending the first 15 to 25 minutes discussing their topics, then interacting with attendees and answering their questions for the remainder of the session. Today, we are thrilled to kick off our seminar series with 2 true champions of air mobility and 2 leaders I absolutely admire. The AMC leadership team of General Mary Ann Miller and Command Chief Terrence Green. They certainly don't need any introduction to this gang. A sincere welcome to you both. We look forward to your remarks, and without any further delay, Mary Ann, the floor is yours.
General McNabb, thank you very much for that introduction. It is awesome being here with my teammate. There's no place I'd rather be than with my teammate, and then of course talking to ATA. You know, ATA is a professional organization, one of many that is very important to the development of our young airmen. So it is an honor to be a part of your first inaugural address here. And what we hope to do today is really share with you a status update for of where AMC is, kind of more particularly in the COVID environment of today, and what we have done and accomplished over the past 3 months and continue to do in this very stressful environment. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what we've done and where we're going. And I think before I do that, I want to give the chief just a couple of comments, and then we'll open up with a COVID video that I want to share with you. But Chief, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Mus. So General McNabb and the ATA family, thank you for this opportunity. You know, when we hear that it's round 1, I almost want to hear like a bell, ting, we got ready to meet at round 1 here, or we're guinea pigs, whichever one of that. But this is a great opportunity to continue to engage with airmen out there. So one of the things I wanted to mention that the backdrop, as General McNabb talked about, is that everything we're going to show that our airmen are doing is on top of everything that's happened with COVID. And our airmen and families, and this is the total force, have not been spared this. Family members have lost jobs, spouses have lost jobs, some people are unemployed. Airmen are supporting families that are without a paycheck. Many of them have lost loved ones along the way. And so this has impacted the nation, and it's certainly impacted our mobility family. As we look ahead and we look through of what things have been going on across the command, I just wanted to lay that foundation that's where we're operating.
Thanks, Chief. So let's roll the COVID video. seen sweeping changes to how we conduct America's business amid the global threat of coronavirus.
People around the world are facing unknown and unforeseen challenges associated with COVID-19. They need help and they need hope.
In this crucial time, Mobility Airmen have answered the call to deliver hope and assistance.
Through the active reserve and Air National Guard components, Mobility Airmen are doing everything possible to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 while continuing to carry out rapid global mobility operations.
Just as AMC responds daily to emergent requirements for airlift across the globe, it is actively supporting the whole of government coronavirus response effort.
Wherever there's a need, our airmen find a way to get it done.
It's a mission that cannot stop, not when others desperately need our help.
Whether it's delivering medical testing supplies to meet the demands across the U.S. or supporting our international teammates,
or transporting military field hospitals and healthcare professionals to communities who've been inundated with the COVID cases,
or bringing Americans home from the far reaches of the globe.
Regardless of how small and frail, our airmen are delivering the medical care, supplies, and hope that so many of our fellow citizens and partners around the world need right now.
The mission carries our airmen far and wide at a moment's notice, away from families and often into danger, all to deliver help that can't wait a moment longer.
You, Mobility Airmen, represent the best of America. For your unwavering dedication, your incomparable professionalism,
We thank you. And we thank your families who exhibit a very special kind of courage, knowing you are headed into the breach to save others.
Our nation is rising to the challenge the COVID-19 pandemic has placed before us. Our Air Force and its Mobility Airmen are partnering with other American heroes to meet this challenge.
We're the best Air Force on the planet because of you.
And with you, our Mobility Airmen will only get better.
Yeah, I tell you what, the chief, General Goldfein, called me and said, we want to do a video of the COVID response, AMC's COVID response all around the world. And he goes, we want to be a part of it. So he and Chief Wright joined in. Our AMC public affairs team built that, sent that forward to HAF. We made some adjustments to it. And I tell you what, that happened in the first month that we were doing this. So we were still learning how to, in the COVID environment, learn how to really stand up, right? At first, we were knocked to our knees with this. And then once we realized, my gosh, the mission continues no matter what, and the chief and I will talk about that. Then we realized, you know what, we better start standing up and we better start moving out, right? And we'll get into a little bit about what we did in the AE community here in a minute. And I got two warriors that are sitting here at the table with us, with the chief and I, and we'll be able to tell their stories here in a minute. But you know, we're able to get through these challenges, and it's a challenge for everyone, whether, as the chief talked about, your families at home are experiencing this, we as airmen are experiencing this, our nation's leaders, our world is experiencing this challenge. And we've gotten through it in AMC because we haven't lost sight of who we are. We haven't lost sight of our vision. We haven't lost sight of the fact that the global environment still needs to move. The market needs to continue moving. Our airmen can continue moving to support the joint fight. Nothing stops in this environment. So we're guided by our priorities. And the chief and I use this all the time because it's important for our airmen to understand of our guiding principles and how we work through any threat that comes our way. When we did this 2 years ago, and the chief and I sat down and said, what are our priorities? We got to the part about mobility operations in a contested environment and said, wow, the NDS drives us to this discussion about what does this mean? Tell you what, 2 years ago, never thought that we'd be talking about COVID-19. Never thought that we would be facing an enemy that is silent, an enemy that is within 40 to 50% of the population. We've been exposed to that and have it and don't even know it. Asymptomatic. This is a silent disaster that we've got going on. Natural disaster, right? It's like a hurricane. You've got to respect it. You've got to understand the force that this thing has, right? You got to be able to adapt in it. You got to have coordinated efforts, and we'll talk about that. And you got to be able to execute the mission around the world, which is what Air Mobility Command has done. So when you look at full spectrum readiness, you know, our first priority as we go through, we had to say, how do we maintain readiness in this COVID environment? When every state was hunkering down, shelter in place, Illinois, shelter in place. California was the first to really see the impacts at the end of January, beginning of February, when the ships, when those cruise ships were having issues, right, at Travis. So that was our first beginning and understanding of what COVID may do to us. It still really didn't touch us. It touched Travis, on the phone with them every day, but what is the impact of the mission around the world? And boy, did it evolve very quickly beyond that. And many conversations with wing commanders. Hey, what's going on outside your gate is eventually going to happen with inside your gate. That infection rate is going to impact you. First thing we did, protect the force in order to protect the mission. And we had to make sure that we can keep our priorities going. The ADX mission, the O&E mission, the joint staff, the alerts that we do for the chairman or for the joint staff, the PNAF missions that we do, the 89th, moving the president, moving our senior leaders around the world. Things that just can't stop in a COVID environment. They continue. So we had to take efforts initially to protect the force, and then over time, how do we then get back into training? So a lot of balancing, talking with wing commanders every day. We went from an OT&E headquarters to an AFTRANS, AFOR posture and position very quickly. At the same time, we sent 95% of the force home. So we were operating in this building with probably anywhere from 3 to 5% of the force within the building. Everyone else was telecommuting, connecting from the outside, really kind of figured out how do we stay super connected in an environment that we really hadn't had to worry about before. So we really then took all the energy and effort, let's get the IT in place. And I'll tell you what, when we come back after this and everyone gets our COVID shots a year from now, we're still not going to be 100% back in this building. We will continue to operate at a certain percent of this force that will telecommute. The Pentagon is only going to bring, at its highest point, 75% of the people back to that building. We are now in a different world. The Air Force, our IT expenditure was about this much, was relatively standard. In COVID environment, we've increased that to a large degree to set up the infrastructure to allow this to continue beyond COVID. So from a full spectrum readiness perspective, we put our heads down into this, said we've got to come up and peek out of the foxhole and get going on readiness. So we figured out how to do that in the midst of this environment. Of course, abiding by all the CDC and higher headquarters and host nation and localities restrictions. Host nations, many host nations said can't come in here. We're mobility, you let us go, we go everywhere. Well, let's work out that. So we had to work out certain restrictions and processes with each individual country, with each individual state. So a lot of work that we've never had done before. We were writing a book every day, and that's what I kept telling everyone. In the midst of this, folks, you're writing a book, so don't lose the notes because we may end up need to do this again. So Chief, over to you, and then we'll roll. I can talk a whole lot on this. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We'll go through our priorities, but boss, everything you're talking about there. And then when you look at, if you've got mobility anywhere in your blood, when you watch that video, you should be pumped up, right? To have the Chief of Staff and the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force bragging about mobility forces and how incredible and important we are during this time. Really, we're trying to tell them anytime mobility forces are important, but this was good to have. And then the other piece on the full spectrum readiness, over the last year, we've been really pushing hard on readiness, and even the Chief of Staff, and you've said a lot that, the time between when we were at peace and then we were in a contingency or wartime, that's the time to build readiness. And we should always look back and say, did I waste any of that time? And our forces, total force, active guard and reserve, have been building on that readiness so that when this COVID hit us and we weren't expecting it, our readiness level was high, our count was solid, and we were able to more look at protecting the force and ride that wave of readiness. And we saw some of it coming down, but we had enough there that we felt comfortable going in, and now we're kind of climbing back out of that and accepting some more risk to keep readiness where it needs to be. But that full spectrum readiness has been very important. And a lot of it is because we were focused on it, we being the entire mobility forces, doing that the last year and a half so that we were ready for this.
Yeah. Yeah, the nuclear mission is something we support and sustain every single day, and that, of course, is a no-fill mission. And you know, there was no delay, there was no doubt that we were going to be there, and we responded to ensure that we could protect the force to execute that mission. And that was, you know, one of the first things we looked at. You know, how do we protect the force and able to have a no pause, no delay, no fail in that mission set, and it worked out great. I can't tell you what we did, or I'd have to kill you. But we took steps to protect the force and get the mission done. You know, the next one is about the mobility operations in that contested environment, and this was exciting. We never thought we'd be facing this kind of a contested environment, and Chief and I would go to Wings and we'd talk about, you know, the cyber threat, all the different threats that we knew were coming our way in this new world that we live in as far as a threat environment. COVID, pandemics were not part of it at all. And I would talk about, hey, their enemy's going to get us left of launch before we even alert the crews. Well, heck, think about this. Not only before you alert the crews, but before you even get out of the house. In fact, you're not even going to be able to get out of the house because we've got a shelter in place thing. So, and it just impacted the entire process. Every single system and process we had was impacted by this. There was not one thing, Chief, that wasn't impacted by this. So literally every day we'd get on the phone with the wing commanders and we just talked through what was going on. What's on your mind? Here's what we're doing. First, protect the force. Let's define what that looks like. Then let's operate these missions. Let's define what that looks like. Then let's be prepared to move the force, continue to move the forces around the globe. Even though there was a stop movement, things still moved. Things will continue to move. The thing that really kind of hit us right off the bat was when Transcom commander said, I need you to move COVID positive patients without an isolation unit. And that's when we all looked at each other and said, repeat that? You know, COVID positive without an isolation unit, right? So that is where I'm going to talk to our two great airmen here who were a major part in how we went through this environment and tried to figure out how do we do this. First time in history that we would ever be asked to do this. And I've got Lieutenant Colonel Greg Frenchy Gaudet and Major Ray Garcia here with us. And I want you all to talk about, you know, Frenchy was there to work through the AE planning team as far as how do we go about this. And then Major Garcia worked through a lot of the transportation isolation system issues. And then later on, I'll talk about a new capacity that we have with the negative pressure capsule that we've actually got in place. But I'm going to turn it over to Frenchy first, and then Ray, jump on in there and just talk about what we went through.
Absolutely, General Miller, Chief Green, thank you for the opportunity to speak today and also in front of ATA. Thank you for the opportunity. But just to let everybody know, as you have already reiterated, this has never been done before in a military aircraft. How do we move a highly infectious person really around the globe? So immediately we had this capability we knew from several years ago with the TIS, the Transport Isolation System, from when we were doing Ebola missions, that we had never actually fielded when we were doing that. So we're going to look at how to utilize that. And then again, as you mentioned, how do we move infected folks without the isolation unit? So that was a new wrinkle in the whole plan. So we spent about 30 days trying to go through multiple different codes and how to do this. So how do we protect the crews? So on all of these missions, we have 21 folks between AE, our critical care teams, our different folks on board, including the front end and the load masters. How do we protect all those folks so that they can continue the mission without transmitting the disease further? And then how do we also protect the patients from the constant up and downs, and what is it going to be if we're flying at a 8,000 foot cabin altitude? What is that going to do to the patient as we're flying through? So trying to think through those different considerations and how do we mitigate those risks. So after going through all that, the big stuff that we came up with is just gargantuan effort across the staff of different PPE things that we can do, different military protection systems that we can modify. And really it came down to looking heavily on what the CDC guidelines are, because there is very little data out about this new disease. So we kind of mirrored that we were able to, luckily so far, we have not had to go to the open concept without using an isolation unit. I think we've moved about 31 patients so far with, I think there's another movement happening today. So luckily we've been able to continue this mission down the road, but really what it's been so far is just using the TIS, the isolation units, which Major Garcia can really talk about how we are able to transmit that or really change it from a Ebola to a COVID type system.
Let me just jump in there first before I give it to Ray. And as we were going through this, meeting every day on this, and
Yes, ma'am.
and we pulled in universities and we pulled in a lot of government agencies and did flow tests with each different airplane to figure out, let's follow these, you know, particulates and figure out where contamination is going to happen based on each airflow of each different airplane. And we've so we've got those racked and stacked. Use the KC-10, use the KC-46. The C-130, it's probably the worst as far as that goes, just based on the airflow. But we've actually moved contaminated patients without an isolation in a C-130.
Yes, ma'am.
And they've actually done that, and the crew, it's been over not quite a month yet, and no one on the crew got sick. So we were able to do it. Not the primary choice. You want an isolation unit. So over to Ray, and you can talk about the TIS.
Yes, ma'am. General Miller, Chief, thank you so much for letting us be here. It was a huge challenge, and we were ready and excited to get after it. We had been training on TIS ops for Ebola to do that. So just like Colonel Gaudet said, we had to expand that problem set, expand the force and the crew size significantly to get after this problem. And we did that, you know, with a partnership. So we worked with SG, University of Nebraska, to come up with ways to protect the force, protect the crews, and then even expanding on that, how do we protect the EMTs on the ground and the maintainers and everyone that touches that aircraft? We hadn't really thought through that problem set to the extent we had to with this, but really got after that. And then using that data that we got from the studies, the airflow studies, to protect our crews even further. Should we have to go to open aircraft? Where's the safest part of each jet? How do we allow our crews to go on a long mission and eat and drink and do those things safely and effectively while taking care of the patients? So big problem sets, great teamwork. It was a good problem to get after.
Yeah, and we couldn't do it without the Guard and Reserve. I mean, we had to mobilize the Guard and Reserve to bring that crew force in when 86% of it is in the Guard and Reserve. It's a great teaming. It's all about, the total force does it every single day. You know, we can't do it without them.
So when you guys are talking about airflow, right? For the guys like me out there, like, what the hell are they talking
Yes,
about airflow? You're talking about in the aircraft, it's better if the air is flowing from the cockpit end to the back so that you don't have any particulates going up towards the crew. So that was the studies that we did with the different types of aircraft on which ones are configured that way, right? Yeah, that's just because I know I've got airmen out there who are probably like, what are they talking about airflow in the aircraft, right?
Yes, sir.
But yeah, so that's all the studies that we had to do to figure that out, to know what's best and what's the dangers or what's the risk to the air crew that they're there, and if it was going to high risk, then they would have to have a lot more PPE on.
Yes, sir.
To fly those long missions. Because goodness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we quickly, the chief and I and all of us, as we were working through this, and you guys would come and brief me every day, you know, more and more every day, it was just like, how do we operate in this contested environment? You know, and it was everything you did had to consider that, to the point where, you know, the maintainers, there's a video out there of maintainers putting on the white suit and decontaminating the airplane every time it comes down with some powerful music behind it. It's really motivating, right? So everyone had a play in this. And to your point, bringing the patients to the airplane, you know, that you have to protect the transporters along the way. Every single segment of this patient movement had to be done differently and had to be evaluated in a different way.
Yes, ma'am.
The way we operate this headquarters had to be evaluated every single way, right? In the glass doors now, you know, you have to put your mask on, wash your hands, leave the stuff outside. I mean, everything has a different process because of this environment. It truly is an environment that we've trained in the chemical world for a long time, never thought we'd have to use, and now we're just adapting that to, you know, to understand this virus and work through it. We have to continue working, and we have, and it's been amazing how ingenious we've been along the way, and the speed of this. And we'll talk about the speed of the negative pressure capsule here at the end and show a video of when you move a TIS, 4 patients, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when you move patients in a negative pressure capsule, we can move up to 28,
Correct,
right?
yes,
And we'll talk about that. Major capacity increase in 30 days. So we'll talk about how the whole system came together at the end and show you a video of that. Let's jump into developing the force. You know, development goes on even in the middle of COVID, but it's different.
It is.
And Chief will talk about, you know, just how different learning can be and development can be in an environment when you're at home. It's a lot of distant learning, but it's a different environment. So Chief.
Yeah, but you know, so if anyone was at ATA when I spoke, I talked about us trying to meet airmen in a virtual world, where they hang out, where they operate, and the more seasoned folks like us at this end of the table are not familiar with that. But I think with COVID-19, it shut down the real world, right? We had a stop movement, and it forced us into that virtual world. I mean, look at what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Who would have thought, you know, 6 months ago that ATA would ask us to come on and do a Microsoft Teams online discussion like this?
So I wanted to do it from his car,
Yeah.
right?
well,
He has a Tesla. I said, Chief,
Hey,
let's do it in
techie.
your Tesla.
Yeah.
That would mean we'd have to wear our masks,
See, right.
right?
But it's the technology. So I'm excited that the technology has opened up our eyes to a lot of things that have been there. So a lot of our airmen are looking at us now like saying, hey, we've been living this life for a long time.
Yeah.
Where have you guys been? And we're discovering just the incredible ways that you can still connect with people, that you can still deliver professional development, you can still communicate. You don't have to have a lot of the meetings, you can do them in a virtual world. So a lot of our professional development, we have not stopped it, we've just changed the format in which it's being delivered. And it's not your old school CBT, you know, no, this is no kidding, distance learning where you've got a whiteboard where you're actually interacting with other students. And so we're calling it, you know, in place, in residence. So you, instead of going TDY to a schoolhouse, you actually do it from your workplace or from home, and you've got set time that you're there and you're engaging and you're doing those. So that the only one for us on the enlisted side, we're keeping ALS as an in-resident. We're minimize the number of students so you can still have the physical distancing, but we thought it's important to maintain that physical and in-person piece. But the NCO Academy, Senior NCO Academy, Chief Leadership Course, as a matter of fact, even the EOS at the Expeditionary Center, they've got the government purchase of Zoom, and they're delivering courses using that. So professional development is continuing. It's just in a different form. And I'm thinking and I'm betting that when we get through this, when we have that vaccine, we're not going to go all the way back, that there's going to be a hybrid, because we're learning such incredible things of the VR technology that we're using to teach airmen with. Those are the things that we're coming out of this with.
Yeah, it will be a new way of doing business.
Absolutely.
You know, folks going off to IDE, SDE, it's going to be virtual.
Yeah.
We will learn what we need to be face to face with, because you got to have face to face. I remember the first time when this first kicked off, the first month, we saw the same 5 people for an entire month. And it's like, can you give me another face? I want to see someone else, right? And we would literally come in, and I remember the time I heard another voice come in the office, oh, let me talk to him, right? I mean, because you have to have that personal contact, right? And you want to put your arms around them and hug them because you haven't seen them in a while, but you can't do that, right? So
I haven't touched you since we got back from Hawaii.
And so
I don't even know if you're real. We might be some virtual. No,
yeah.
It's okay.
So we wear our masks everywhere, and we are very good about this. And but we're
getting ready to have the Squadron Commanders course,
right.
and
virtual Squadron Commanders
continuing
course.
on, and that's going to be virtual.
Right.
So
and Corona next week is virtual. So the life that we are adjusting to is a virtual world for sure.
Yes.
Next, you know, we talk about modernization and recapitalization efforts. Let me just jump right into the KC-46 here first, because we had a victory last month. Actually, April 2nd, we had a huge victory and a COVID little party of at RVS 2.0 is an absolute win for the team. Air Force and Boeing got together on an agreement, and we are moving out on that, and we will actually start accepting airplanes that have the RVS 2.0 in 23, and then by 24 it'll be put into the line. And so we are on the absolute road that we need to be on. Before we were wandering, and we really didn't have the right solution to get to the right RVS for our warfighters and for our crews, but now we have that. So in development right now, working closely with the teams, they're still meeting, even in this COVID environment. There was a little bit of a delay. It disrupted a little bit and a little bit of a delay, but now we are back on. Many of it is virtual. The face-to-face things that they need to do, they absolutely are getting after that. So we are quickly getting back on the RVS path prior to COVID. So we are in a great place as far as the KC-46. And then of course, CBM Plus, you know, when you looked at unscheduled maintenance has decreased by 8.1% in the C5, in 3 systems of the C5. We've put it on just 3 actual systems, and we've seen progress, and we've saved money, and we've saved supply chain, and we've saved time for our airmen. And we will continue to expand conditions-based maintenance on. We're putting it on the 135, and it has just in 4 months seen a decrease of almost 3%. In unscheduled maintenance. So that's really, really good for our fleet. It's good for aircraft availability. It's good for maintainers' time. And it's in sustainment of the aircraft over the long haul. It's really, it's an imperative, and we will continue to put money and invest in conditions-based maintenance, and just like the airlines do, and really reap the benefits from that. The KC-46 will lead the way on that. And Delta Tech Ops is working closely with us as we go forward. So we will continue to go through modernization and recapitalization as we look at different airframes. We're going to be stressed by the budget coming up in 22. That is going to be a given. So we will have to prioritize and see where we go. Another modernization effort is the next generation AOC. And actually in the FY20 President's budget, we fully funded our next generation AOC. We will break ground on a new state-of-the-art building a few years from now. Right now, the AOC is we're gonna uproot them out of this building in the next month, put them in a temporary location, and after about 3.5 years, they will go into the new building, and they will be combined with the A3. There will be folks from TACC, and it will be much more fused. Efficient system with the right people sitting in the right rooms and able to integrate the mission sitting side by side as we go forward. We will also look at how we integrate into the JADC2, the Joint All-Domain Command and Control Network, as we go forward. So we're working closely with the Air Force on our AOC and how we become a part of that effort, because it will be critical to how we communicate around the world and execute the mission with our joint fight. So a lot of great things are happening in that environment. Chief, anything on the modernization?
Yeah, I know this has not been in our budget, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, that we've got to also focus on the comm piece of what we're learning, our shortfalls, and being able to do a lot of the virtual type world, bandwidth, and the comm systems that we've got in the work centers. Yeah. That I think that's going to be a tension with the budget for a lot of the units out there on creating that environment that we can operate in a virtual environment. We didn't think it would come this fast, but it's here. Yeah. And I think that's going to create some tension as well.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. All right, let's talk about innovation here real quick. And what I'd like to do is show you a video of the negative pressure capsule. And this is literally put together in a month. Went from napkin design to actually build. And they're doing the final testing on it right now, and it should go into production, I would say, in the next 10 days, 2 weeks. And the capacity, as I talked about, in a TIS, you can move 4 patients, infected patients. In this negative pressure capsule, you can move 28. So increased capability, and we have options to buy up to over 20 of these. I don't think we'll go that far, but we'll get a couple, if not 4 or 5 of them for the future as we go forward. So let's run the video, please.
It's unlike anything we've ever seen in the Air Force. This is a rapid acquisition prototype into possibly straight up operational effectiveness. This is a crazy effort. We had a concept available called a negatively pressurized Connex. It was taking a prefabricated 40-foot ISO container, adding in a negatively pressurized system, which is a tried and true technology to keep viruses out, and then putting it on a C-17.
So what we've done here is we've taken a box, we've negatively pressurized it. That way any bioorganisms that an individual may be infected with remain within that box and will not leak outside. So now we can transport these patients from a more remote area to better medical care without potentially contaminating the air crew, the aircraft, or the caregivers who are trying to assist on the way. So we have it outfitted for 28 C-17 seats, or you could fold up some of the seats and instead put in litters.
It also has the capacity to hold up to 8 people on litters and any combination thereof. It's also configured to safely carry the aeromedical teams so that they can wear their personal protective equipment and also exit the Connex after donning and doffing so that they can get the rest of the relief they need on these long flights. We're looking at 4 different criteria. Number 1, can it contain the virus? Number 2, is it usable for the aeromedical teams that will be executing the mission? Number 3, can it be certified to be airworthy? And number 4, will it be safe to fly? So if we can answer those 4 criteria, we'll be able to move forward with a phase 2, which is procuring the production prototype assets, and hopefully we'll have capability on the ground of the warfighter in 30 days. So the context of this was rapid procurement, and so we based it on easily available technologies with an integration challenge. So currently forecasted is the company, as designed, should be able to produce these at the rate of about 4 every 15 days.
So a total of 1 month, we went from an idea that was just a drawing on a piece of paper I did to an actual final product in which we're going to submit the paperwork to US Transcom as a solution to then procure more of these.
Taking a concept on a piece of paper less than a month ago to actually having iron on the ramp to test is a testament to the hard work that everyone's put forward. From our engineering teams, to the aircraft SPOs, to the test and evaluation community, and we cannot look past the work that Delta Flight Products, UTS, and HEI have put in, pulling 24/7 shifts to basically build something from a concept to something that can actually be tested and produced in such a short period of time is incredible to speak to what this means to everyone on the project.
They're really moving at the speed of light, at the speed of relevance. We've all come together and they've been a fantastic support team to myself during a time like this. I've never seen so much effort go into pushing a product that can be used to save lives and meet what the Air Force needs.
Yeah, that was absolutely incredible. It's motivating to understand just how, we went from a small capacity to an incredibly large capacity. And as I said, we've got options to buy 4 at a time, up to 30 actually. So amazing how the whole U.S. government came together with industry and universities to make that happen. So huge effort, and we've also got, Travis building 3D printing the N95 masks, and Dover Innovation Lab was doing 3D face shields for the medical and the SF use across each base. They were just doing so many different things to create an environment for the mission to succeed. We had to literally redo all shifts. Any shift work had to be redone, and we do blue and silver shifts, and to protect the force, we had to send a lot of folks home to telecommute, build that technology to be able to do that. And at the same time, as we're on the ramps or in the offices, we had to readjust every single thing we were doing to continue the product, to continue moving in our mission sets and doing what we do for the Joint Force. So. And we continue to modify every day. Change has been something I think, as we grew up, there wasn't really a whole lot of change. As the chief and I grew up anyway, it was kind of a stable force. It was a big stable force as we went along. I tell you now, we are a much smaller force, and the iterations, to your points, Chief, are just incredible. And it's exciting to just turn loose airmen and let them go. And that's what we did with the, when you talk about moving COVID positive in a, uncontained environment, so to speak, you guys figure it out. And with the NPC, the engineers came back and said, or we started talking about how the airflow studies, that's what it was. We started talking about, hey, we need to do airflow studies on how we move COVID positive patients in an open air in the back of an airplane. And they go, why? Well, we don't do that. So why would we consider doing that? I said, no, we have to do that. No, we put them in a capsule. You're not getting the point. We need to probably move them. We're not understanding how big how many people we may have to move. And we may run out of these, ability to put them in an isolation unit pretty doggone fast. So the airflow studies, as we were working with the scientists, they go, yeah, you could actually do it. By the end of it, they realized that, yeah, this is the capacity that we can use if need be, and it's on the shelf, ready to roll with all the studies having been done and all the work being done by you and your teams in the OPT to ensure that we've got the right protective equipment and the procedures in place across the globe, right? Yeah. Across the globe to make this happen. So incredible work. Chief, any comments about innovation? Then we got to open it up to questions.
Right, so we're time for questions. The only thing I would throw in innovation, Boss, is just reminding folks that it's not just about the products that come out of this, but it's about the mindset and the culture we create in the formation to say, hey, that at the headquarters, we've been pushing hard on innovation. We've got innovation labs at almost all of our bases. From the most junior airmen to the most senior ones can get in there and get their hands dirty and do some of that. And it's about being able to face a problem and come up with incredible solutions. And it's that culture and putting that into the DNA of every airman across the mobility forces. So when we were faced with this, the headquarters didn't have all the answers, and it's the wings that were coming up with a lot of these things and feeding us. And that's the incredible piece of having this innovative culture ingrained in a formation. I wanted to hammer that in a little bit to make sure. And I know we're kind of running on time, and yeah, we get some questions.
So let me turn it back over to General McNabb, and we'll open it up for questions. Sir, over to you.
All right, General Miller, Chief Green, all I can say is terrific. You certainly are taking care of things that I have never seen and doing it so superbly. You and your mobility team are really doing amazing things every day and certainly making a difference. I see your comments have inspired lots of questions, so let's move on to the question and answer portion of the seminar. Popeye, what is the first question we have for General Miller and Chief Green?
All right, ma'am, the first question we have says, I am grateful for the time General Miller and Chief Green are spending with us, but I would love to hear what you learned about yourself or your leadership style during this time.
Actually, that is a great question. Great question. Because in the very beginning, we were all looking for, we were all looking to reach back on the experience that we've had in the past, right? I'm coming up on 39 years in July, in July. And, I'm trying to look for something to say, oh, we've been through this before. And then we're looking around and go, you look around and go, nobody's been through this before. Okay. You sure no one's been through this before, so it really is, let's just fall back on on what we do. We're a team. We've got to get the job done. We went right to the wings and said, we need to support you. We exist to support you and to get the mission done. How do we best do that? What do you need? And it was really reflective of the great leaders that we have out there. They were all over it. They knew the infection rates on the outside. They knew how that was going to influence inside. They knew what they needed to shut down in order to protect the force. I mean, it's just a battle rhythm we went through. But I think what I learned out of it was we assembled, we had the right leaders in the right places. We had the right airmen in the right spots. We built the right team over the years to be ready for this. And I think that's the lesson that I came away with. What did we lack? Nothing, because we had the right leaders in the right place because we developed them over the years. So all it is another problem, more complex than we've gone through before, because we were still learning in the beginning, how contagious is this? And you saw all the rumors, right? I guess it was a real shock the day that we found out that you could be infected and be asymptomatic. And in fact, there could be 40 to 50% of the population that is that way. So everyone that approached you, you had to assume they were infected, right? So that changes your thought process. That changes every process you have. You know, coining people, you know, let's clean the coin off. I hand it down, you pick it up, you clean the coin off. I mean, it's crazy, the stuff that we have got to do in order to keep the mission going, for something as simple as coining somebody to as making sure we can operate the nuclear mission or support the president on any given day. And that presidential support piece, oh my gosh, when you've got the White House going, how are you going to do this? Oh, that's a conversation, right? How are you going to protect everyone that's in this whole process from start to finish? So I realized at first, you know, let's pull something off the shelf. It's not there. Hey, we got everything we need. We got all the leaders in place. Let's unleash the talent. Let's provide them the guidance that they need. Let's not stand in their way. Let's make sure there's funding that we have. At first, I think I was stressed because I'm not sure I was providing what we all needed to do for the field. And you could sense that in each one of us, that there was a little bit of stress there. And then eventually it's like, hey, we're trying as hard as we can. And we're all in this together. That was the realization that brought it down to a let's just breathe effort, when we all realized we're in this together. And the problem is right in front of us. We've diagnosed the problem. We understand how to go about it. Well, let's get after it. But it took us about a week to kind of calm the force, to go, you know, let's get after the main efforts that we have to.
Well, I'd say two things. One, the relationships were so important that we had built over the years, and that's what carried. I know as the command chiefs, we were a very tight team. We created several forums that we were sharing every day. As the different wings were discovering things, we were sharing techniques and sharing findings. And then the other piece that was really important for us, I think, as leaders, was that caring and compassion. Because we found, you know, a lot of the families there, when we were in a hard lockdown, you know, we had airmen whose parents and siblings were in very dire straits. Some of them had lost relatives and couldn't go to a funeral. They died alone. As a matter of fact, we were on the phone with one airman whose dad was in the hospital. And he passed away, and the mom was also in the hospital, and we were able to talk to him. He went home just in time to see his mom also pass. And this was a young A1C that had just been out in our force for 7 months. He just arrived at the base for 3 months. It was a pretty emotional conversation with that young man. For him going home, he was the eldest of two that lost both his parents to COVID-19. And so is a lot of that caring and compassion too that I felt from the headquarters for what our wings were going through, because it's the wing commanders and the wing command teams were really carrying the brunt of this to work with the mission, and then the tensions inside and outside of the gate, and, you know, shortages in the commissary and restrictions and CDCs, and they were really carrying the water. So a lot of what we did and we found very helpful was making sure that we had a caring, compassionate environment here to make sure that those wing commanders can operate the way they saw fit in their part of the puzzle there. But those are two things: the teaming relationships, and then caring and compassion, especially in a time of crisis, that you've got to take care of your folks. They will do the job, but I got to know that you care about them.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
All right, ma'am, the next one we have for you is, what is the status of the Commercial Air Refueling Initiative? Understand you have been preparing a report for SECAF to define a road forward.
Peek on it at 10, no?
We have. So, yeah, Secretary of the Air Force has agreed to study this, and what we owe her in a couple of weeks is a list of the objectives that we want to get after in the study. So we will look at this. But we owe them those objectives. And I think it's something, you know, I get a lot of questions. Why would you do this? KC-46 is coming online. Why do you need this capacity? You just never know what's going to be around the corner. I think we ought to, it's going to be a struggle for the FAA. It's going to be a struggle for the contractors that try to build this capacity, but I think it's something we as a government have to work through in order to provide a capability, even if it's small, because I think what we will learn out of that is relationships. It's an ability to lean on a contractor. And when you get into a dire situation, we will still have, after we accept the 179th KC-46, we will still have 300 135s. And those airplanes are getting old. They're over 60, right? By the time we retire them, they will be close to 90 years old. So that is an airplane that will continue to perform well in the next couple of decades. But we've got to make sure that we are looking at every single option to keep every option on the table. It's not a big capacity, but I want to run through it. I want to run through these wickets to really run through the wickets, right? With the FAA and understand how we would work with a contractor to build this kind of capacity. So it's more the process than the capacity at this point. It's important.
All right, the next question we have is, what is AMC doing to get usable software to our crews and warfighters? Do we have a software factory?
We want to build a software factory. We've got nascent ideas on how we would do that. Actually, Will Roper is, he wants to build an air mobility app store right now, right? You have to build the airmen, and you have to, first of all, you have to build the airmen and then make sure that you can pull them out of capacity they're used somewhere else in order to man this and do that. So we want to do this. We know we have to do this. I think with the KC-46 coming online, and just the way our AOC and just the way the future looks for mobility and for our Air Force and for the DoD for that matter, you have to be able to develop as you go, and you need software. You need software to do that. You need developers to do that. And you've got to create a weapon systems for the future that will be able to adapt quickly, and that requires both those pieces, right? The trained personnel to code and the ability to adjust and create things on the fly, because the threat is constantly changing. So it's a capacity we have to build towards. We haven't started that because we're still searching for the right budget number to get after, but we need that capacity, and we will continue to pursue that.
All right, the next question we have is, could you spend a few minutes describing how the Air Force is addressing logistics under attack as it applies to the mobility force structure and your ability to rapidly generate combat capability in austere locations? Is this capability supportable in future budget decisions, fiscal year 22 and beyond?
Great question. There's no doubt that we need the capacity to be able to do what you have described, to be agile in a wartime environment, to be able to pick up and move. We are, currently, if you look at the footprint of our GAM structure and our ability to move around the world, and General McNabb knows this better than anyone, being Transcom commander, big targets on the map, right? And which is great, which is how we move things. We're going to keep this system moving. We're going to protect the force. We're going to protect those bases, set the conditions that we can continue to use the GAMs and the en route structures around the world. But we also need to understand that we need to lift and shift quickly, and whether that's a C-17 or C-130 or other capability that comes in the future, we have to be able to lift and shift a certain amount of the force in order to enable the joint fight. So we're continuing to look at this, the agile combat employment environment. Each MAJCOM has come together to build a CONOPS for this. We'll continue to exercise this capability. It will not be a huge capability, but it is a capability that we will continue to drive towards because it will be needed in many different areas.
Would you say that exploring vertical lift would be futuristic looking at that? Yeah,
vertical lift, yes. Vertical lift is going to be a part of that. I was part of Will Roper's Agility Prime, where he had vendors come in and talk about the flying car, and it was pretty awesome, that capability. And the speed that a vehicle like that, the requirement was all about speed. We don't need another slow moving vertical vehicle. We need a vertical vehicle that can cover a lot of ground, 1,000 miles in a quick amount of time. So the requirements are shifting out there, and there's companies out there that think they can do this. That will then feed into the Agile Combat employment environment greatly. So yeah, it's exciting, right? It's exciting.
All right, the next question that we have is what efforts are being planned at AMC to allow the MAF fleet to operate in a peer-to-peer environment?
You know, we are building plans to right now to go on the shelf only because we don't have enough money to fund what we really want to fund. When you look at AFWIC and what the warfighters are integrating and the future warfight and how that will play out, we as mobility airmen are sitting at that table and helping them discuss the capabilities that we need for the future. AFWIC is on board and the Air Force is on board with the mobility force of the future. It will all come down to where will it fit in the planning defense budget. Where will it fit in that? And then when we get into the POM cycle, will we be able to fund it as the top line probably starts working its way down a little bit for our Air Force. So we know what we need to do. We continue to look at the future and the capabilities that we need to have, but we will be stressed to be able to keep those on track for the future fight. There's going to be a lot of big trades and important trades coming up for our Air Force leadership over the next couple of years. We may have to stop doing some things in other mission sets. And this MAJCOM will continue moving things around the world and supporting the joint fight.
Great. The next question that we have is what is AMC's plan to balance mental health risks to force with restrictions to movement and shelter at home restrictions?
Yeah, I speak with the chaplain every morning at 7 o'clock. He and I, that's a new COVID thing too. There was a point in time going through this that I would do my morning routine and get up and it just wasn't enough. I'm like, chaplain, 7 o'clock, you and I on the phone. You got to continue to fill me up before we get into this day. And we would talk about that. We would talk about the health, not only of my mental health and his mental health, but the spiritual health of the force. But really, what do we do when folks are just behind closed doors? And you see the trend for Chief and I watch this and talk about this almost every day. The stress on the force with domestic violence going up, the stress on the force with, you've got the kids, the whole family's now under that roof and there's no escape. So that's stress. And if you can't figure out how to get through it, it's going to manifest itself in certain ways. And I talk to the chaplain every morning. He's talking to his chaplains. They're talking, chief talks to the command chiefs every day. And we're just all, we all just want to do home visits and knock on doors and see how things are going. That's not possible. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to pick up the phone, stay connected, and understanding, are we really connecting with the airmen, or are we just making that phone call? Are we really making an impact? But it's something that the chief and the command chiefs talk about a lot.
Right, and we're pushing hard also on those mental health support agencies to get out and increase the amount of contact points that they have with airmen and families. And they're doing a lot of online, even within the mental health, they're doing online visits. They're doing a lot of those things. Our chaplain corps, they're doing a lot of online services. I've been teasing them that they're becoming televangelists, because they have so many people, they're actually having more people as an audience listening to their sermon than they do in person. We're finding also that our senior NCOs, I have one example of one chief that she mentioned that she would normally do a breakfast chat with airmen. Pre-COVID, she would have maybe 10 or 12 airmen come out, typically no maintainers, but she'd gone to an online form of that, and she had about 28, and about 15 of them were actually maintainers. So you're finding the maintenance airmen that no longer have to change out of their dirty uniform and change of boots to come out to a breakfast chat. They can just log in wherever they are. So our forces are finding innovative ways to kind of work through some of that mental stress and create contact points, but it's a challenge. And we don't know what we don't know, because coming out as we begin to open up from the lockdown, now we're beginning to see, you know, what are some of those consequences, things that we couldn't see that were happening behind closed doors, of alcohol abuse, you know, poor decisions in the home, and a lot of those challenges that we didn't have access to. And we got to really peel that back and make sure we're taking care of the force.
All right, next one's a bit of a related question, is how have crews been directed to handle post-mission medical requirements such as monitoring symptoms, self-quarantining, etc., or has this been delegated down to the squadron or installation level?
Yeah, the crews each know their responsibilities, and they, you know, if they get symptomatic, then you know, they go into quarantine, and then it, you know, they will reach out to their leadership and let them know, and then we'll take the appropriate healthcare measures if we need to. Sometimes you just stay home and stay in the room and don't get near anybody, right, as we go forward. So this is ever changing. You know, when we got to in the very beginning of this COVID environment, we had to protect the force in order to go in and execute the mission sets. The crews, you never had to say, this is what you need to do. They knew exactly what to do. I need to stay away from this. I need to isolate. If I'm going on a trip, I need to isolate from my family. Particularly if you're doing, if you're supporting a nuclear mission, you're not going to see your family, you know, for a period of time. So it was amazing. Crews just jumped in and did what they needed to do, and the healthcare system has just been amazing in supporting all of our needs across the board. Testing is now the next phase in what we're doing. How do we build the testing capacity to understand what part of the force has been affected? So we are moving into phase 2 of testing, and we learn each day on how we negotiate this as we try to execute the mission. So and we're getting the proper resources to do everything that we need to do.
All right, ma'am, and the last one is, can you talk to the wonderful partnership between AMC and ATA?
Is that from General McNabb?
It is a wonderful partnership. You know, as I said in the beginning, you know, associations are critical to force development, and we've each been involved in associations. I'm involved in a lot of associations, and they're all unique in their own way. They all feed our soul and feed what we do, and it's great to be a part of that. I think it's awesome for the chief and I to be able to just spend time with ATA to share what we're doing around the command. Everyone's got their heart and soul into airlift and tanker, and the future is bright. And I think this relationship with ATA is critical to, you know, associations can help foster relationships. They foster movement and mission sets, and that's what ATA does. So it's critical. It's awesome to be a part of, right? All associations are just add so much value. It's great.
Ma'am, thank you so much. We're going to kick it back now to General McNabb for his closing remarks.
Thank you, General Miller and Chief Green. And I couldn't agree more about our relationship between ATA and AMC. But no, thanks much. I really do. Thank you for taking such wonderful care of this national treasure, our air mobility team. It is not often that such a wide audience gets the opportunity to hear your thoughts and interact directly with you this way. I know the entire Airlift Tanker Association and all of your mobility warriors have benefited greatly from this. We hope that you both will both continue to join us as attendees for our future seminars, and maybe even come back again as one of our featured guests. Speaking of future seminars, round 2 of the seminar series is scheduled for June 12th at 1300 Eastern, and I will be the featured guest. This will be an impossible presentation to follow, which you all just did, but I'll do my best. I look forward to spending some more time with all of you and fielding your questions. Please tell your friends and coworkers about this series. And if you have any requests for guests or topics, please email them to the address that will be on the screen. Thank you to Popeye and the ATA and AMC teams for putting this all together. And thanks again to two of my heroes, General Miller and Chief Green, and all of you who took the time to join us today. All the best, and stay safe and stay healthy. Out here.